number 1, June 1988. Statement of charges. While serving in its capacity as President of the United States of America, the respondent did willfully and knowingly commit and are directed to be committed the following crimes. A. Crimes against peace, namely planning, preparing, initiating, or waging a war of aggression, or a war in violation of international treaties, agreements or assurances, or participating in a conspiracy to accomplish the foregoing by causing to occur an attack on the nation of Cuba on 4/17. Prosecution.
Guilt or innocence in the eyes of the law. That is what is decided at a trial. We are here to determine the guilt or innocence of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy for his role in the Bay of Pigs invasion of the sovereign nation of Cuba. We are here to prove his guilt, the prosecution. We shall do so by calling witnesses who were involved in the planning of the invasion, people who were affected by the invasion, and experts who tell why the invasion was illegal under international laws, such as the UN Charter, the OAS Charter, and the Montevideo Conference. The invasion had serious repercussions for the U.S. It forced Cuba deeper into the Soviet sphere of influence and destroyed any chance of peaceful coexistence between Cuba and the U.S. It helped form our disastrous policy over Vietnam, and it set the bad precedent of the U.S. supporting violent revolutions in sovereign nations, and also caused the nations of the world to call into question the United States foreign policy and its own dependability. The defense will try to justify the actions of the defendant in this trial, and try to show the reasons for his decision to invade a sovereign nation. However, this does not change the cold, hard facts of the case, which we, the prosecution, shall bring out.
Defense.
To effectively present a defense for President John Kennedy, it's necessary to review the events transpiring before the year 1961 in Cuba. For in fact, there was not only one revolution in Cuba, but there were actually two separate and distinct revolutions. So let's recount the sordid tale of Cuba, Castro, and the communists. Bastida admittedly was a ruthless dictator, and Castro overthrew him and promised to install a democratic form of government. He took steps towards this end by installing the kind-hearted president, Urrutia. This was the first revolution. Then, Castro savagely assassinated Urrutia and allied himself with the communist Khrushchev, becoming a satellite less than 100 miles from our shores. Castro became a vicious despot, worse than Batista. And this rebellion by the Cubans in the Bay of Pigs against Castro's second revolution, the killing of Urrutia. Now, two distinct forces were involved against each other. It was the democratic Cubans involved in the Bay of Pigs versus the communist Castro. Based upon this short little tale, let's construct Kennedy's defense. The act was legally justifiable based upon the Monroe Doctrine in defense of the Western Hemisphere. In 1823, President James Monroe declared that he would not allow foreign intervention into the Western Hemisphere. The purpose of this was twofold. First of all, it provided for our own general welfare, our own defense, and second of all, it protected the country being attacked. Now, historical precedent for its usage was in 1861 in Mexico, involving Napoleon III. He tried to colonize Mexico and we repulsed his attack, thus benefiting Mexico and protecting our own borders. Now, we must invoke this act by assisting the revolutionaries with foreign aid. And because this has been a foreign intervention of communist Russia through Khrushchev with Castro into Cuba, they now control it, and Cuba is a personal satellite. Due to this, the citizens of Cuba are suffering, and our own national defense is being jeopardized. We have communism next to 100 miles away from our shore. Remember, our Constitution mandates that our government has to protect the general welfare, and thus, through foreign aid, Kennedy was doing so. Now, our next point is that these men were volunteers. I repeat, they were volunteers. They were not mercenaries. They were merely revolutionaries requesting foreign aid. All soldiers were volunteers, and we did not utilize our military. Anyone landing who were not Cubans was unauthorized and unknown to Kennedy. For as you will see in testimony, Kennedy was kept in the dark, misled, and directly lied to about lots of details. Also, there is a historical precedent for foreign aid. We supplied England with numerous weapons and craft on their landing in D-Day in World War II. Secondly, we gave aid under the Truman Doctrine to Greece and Turkey. The reason for this was to stop the expansion of communism into these countries. Finally, there is a higher law involved, one which has jurisdiction over the universe which we live in. Castro has placed his country in a position equivalent to that of slavery. He has subjugated the entire nation under his bloody, iron-fisted tyranny. Thus, under a higher moral code, we have the responsibility to assist in this abolition. Thus, foreign aid. Also, it's important to note that slavery was legal in the United States, but entirely immoral. Thus, its destruction is necessary. Future Secretary of State at the time, William Seward, eloquently expressed this viewpoint by saying, "I know there are laws of various kinds which regulate the conduct of men, but there is a higher law than the Constitution, which regulates our authority over the domain, that of nature. Likewise, there is a higher authority that rules over this world, which has jurisdiction superseding that of the UN." All right, now let's transcend to a more mundane plane. We'll answer the exact legal charges that they bring forth. On crimes against peace, this is wrong. We were abetting peace by assisting the revolutionaries in overthrowing a violent totalitarian state by installing a true democratic form of government. So we were assisting them with foreign aid in installing a democratic government. This is actually assisting peace, not crimes against peace. On planning, most of this was done by the Cuban Revolutionary Council, and the other planning was done mostly by Dwight Eisenhower, the president before Kennedy. And on preparing, all weapons appropriated were done by President Eisenhower before Kennedy came to office. On initiating, the Cuban Revolutionary Council initiated the war, not Kennedy, and any other involvement was unauthorized by President Kennedy. On waging war of aggression, revolutionaries waged the war. Again, any other involvement was unauthorized by Kennedy, and he gave explicit orders that no American involvement was supposed to happen. And finally, to show that it's not a war of aggression, we had an option of ordering the Air Force to get involved in the landing, and it was not, to show that Kennedy did not want any direct American involvement besides foreign aid. And on a war in violation of international treaties or assurances, it was not our war, but it was revolt by the Cubans. And secondly, there were no U.S. forces involved. Finally, on conspiracy, this was done and initiated by the Cuban Revolutionary Council. I stress it was a revolution brought about by internal dissent. One segment, that of democracy, versus the other segment, that of Castro and communism. In conclusion, Kennedy's involvement in the Bay of Pigs is defensible on various grounds. It's legally defensible, it's morally defensible, and in conjunction with past historical examples. Do not put that innocent man in jail. He is to assist the revolutionaries in attempting to follow our shining example of democracy. John F. Kennedy is not guilty of all the aforementioned charges, and testimony will prove to this fact. I urge you, the jury, vote him not guilty.
Mr. Alliance.
See?
Okay, yeah, go.
Shoot, Mike.
A little late.
Wait, now the light's off.
Yeah, the counter's going. Recording.
Okay, here you go.
What farms do you own in Guatemala?
I own 2 plantations and 2 large fincas, one on the coast in Rentelehu, and others throughout Guatemala.
Are you friends with any political people?
Yes, I am very good friends with President Irigoras of Guatemala. I'm his backer and advisor.
And do you happen to know the advisor of the ambassador to the U.S. in Guatemala?
Yes, Robert Davis, First Secretary of the Ambassador.
How did you know?
He and another man from the United States approached me and made an offer for me to approached the president and asked for permission to train Cuban troops on one of my plantations, one-on-one.
When was this? When did this take place?
Around, well, the training of the troops, or when they approached
Oh,
me?
when they approached you.
They approached me about August of 1960, somewhere in the summer of 1960.
And did the president agree to do this when you asked him about it?
President Yadegaras agreed to allow some troops to train on my farms.
And did you handle this for him?
Yes, I was his project coordinator, as he called it. I made sure that the troops were concealed and nobody else was allowed on the plantations while they were being trained.
Which of your plantations, farms were?
The one at Helvetia, and the most important was Retalejo, because we built an airstrip.
And who was in charge? You or was it someone
There
else?
was an American named Frank Bender who was in charge of the troops in general, and he was the man who was in charge of their training. I was just there to make sure that nobody from the outside got in to see them.
Do you know what department this American worked for?
No, I did not, but I was sure that he was under command from Davis, because Davis was his brother.
I object. Sheer speculation on the part of the witness.
Obviously, Frank Bender was under some kind of command, because he was in charge of troops that were asked by
I
me.
object once again. It's sheer speculation again. He has absolutely no knowledge as to the disposition of Frank Bender. He doesn't. Sheer speculation.
Frank Bender was in charge of the troops that were trained in my farms, which were asked by me to train by Americans, and he was an American. Is that good enough?
And did this training of the troops go on at President Kennedy's inauguration in January of 1961?
Yes, it did.
Thank you very much, Mr. Algiers. This defense's witness now.
Where you going?
What? Cross-examination of defense.
Almost half.
Should have a double up here.
Are you aware of American political events, let's say presidential elections?
Alex. Pretty much, yes.
Alex, get up in front of the camera, sir.
The newspapers in Guatemala.
Excuse me, the prosecution, the defense
We like to
reserves the right
counsel.
to recross-examination at a later date.
Exactly, we can recross, but
Okay. This is informational.
Can we do that? Can we think we reserve right to recross now, Mr. Attorney?
No.
It's set in the rules.
I know.
So, also says you can redirect.
But you said you'd call another witness. You said you called Bissell today.
Just forget about it.
they did, but we do have the right to recross nonetheless.
Well, we won't ask questions. Alex, you can't ask questions now. It says under here, the rules. I'll show you where it says it, the judge. Your Honor.
Forget it, I love a time, I can't wait.
You got a golf team?
We won't ask questions now. We'll just reserve the right. They need to answer the witness.
Okay, you're not going to ask any questions?
We won't ask any questions now. We'll just reserve the right.
All right.
Prosecuting attorney, call your next witness. We'll reserve the right without asking any first questions.
Can they do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Certain rules. Eudorus?
Remember, Cohen, don't be afraid to speak up.
I didn't check up.
I'm Bissell. Like, well, I'm
We'll do all the recrossing. You don't call Bissell.
It wasn't going to be I just want to
You have to wing it.
You listed a specific order for us.
Mike told me yesterday it was going to be Bissell and Castro.
Exactly. Mike, not yesterday.
Our team is prepared for Bissell and Castro. So we're just gonna do.
Your team should be prepared for every witness.
Rules of trial dictate that you have less than Hey Andrew, how do you pause this thing? How do you pause this? On the bottom.
You press stop.
You gotta hit the red button to make sure it's done.
We can do it all tomorrow. But that's our fault. You gave us
You
a
gave us a stupid order.
What relationship did you have with Algios?
Alejos. He's a close personal friend of mine, and he's also a background advisor. He owns much land in Guatemala, so it's profitable to be such a friend.
When he came to you with the plan to train Cuban troops under American auspices on Guatemalan soil, what was your opinion in this plan?
I agreed to meet with the Americans who offered this, and since I am anti-communist, I figured I'd listen to them, hear what they had to offer.
The question was when Algios came to President Unidoris to ask him about the plan, what was his opinion of it?
And I agreed to meet with the Americans, which I did at my mansion.
And what did the Americans come to you and say? What did
They asked me to allow the training of Cuban troops on my land, which
Objection, that's hearsay.
they came to my house and asked me this.
But that's...
You say if they're Cuban troops.
And Pierre, you not have to call the guy and have him ask to say it.
Here's that. This is yours. Overrules our opinion.
They came to him and told him
They were in
that
my house
he's
sitting-
reporting facts.
sitting in
that
my-
they
Is it
told
wait,
him.
what
Are they in right now?
He is saying
Hey, Robert,
what they said to him. That is what he's testifying to. He's not testifying to the truth of their statement. He's testifying what they are saying to him.
Under hearsay, I'm going to read this objection. Hearsay goes,
How can it be hearsay if they came up?
any evidence of a statement made by someone who was not present in the court.
He was present.
He was
But
present.
he was present when they said that.
The judge
They said that
was
to
also-
him. Okay, and who was one of the Americans who came to him?
Robert Davis, first secretary to the ambassador.
I spoke to Mr. Lister, you're not leaving
And
early.
did you think of this plan as being under the watching of the U.S. government with the approval of the U.S. government? Since it,
Of course.
and
Objection
Yeah, I was
to
gonna-
speculation.
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 The U.S. government is giving the support to these.
Annie,
Second.
I never used
wait, they stricken them. All right, and when what did you hear of this after you approved of the plan? Did you keep up on what was going on?
I put Lejos in charge of it. So what happened was, as it went on, when they opened the airstrip of Red Lego, I went and opened it formally in a presentation.
I'd like to make another objection. That's leading the witness, it's assuming that he is hearing other things about it.
No, I asked him if he did.
Yeah, no, that was not how you asked. You asked it, what did you hear of it?
Say that.
Any more?
I kept up on it, but my main man was Roberto Lejos, who was in charge of it. He was my project coordinator, as I call it. And what happened was I helped open the airstrip of Red Lego, which they used for takeoffs, I guess, to...
They used the Americans?
The Cubans did. It was one of my plantations where the troops were being trained. Well, not the other guy. I get the witness mixed up. One of Alejos' plantations where the men were being trained. They built an airstrip and I helped open it officially.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is all at this time.